This is the Hebron Heritage Museum. The first room that we're in right now shows the biblical period. And here we have photographs of Cave of Machpela, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. The picture on top is, of course, the artist's vision of the cave that Abraham purchased 3,800 years ago. Following that, we see the building that Herod built 2,000 years ago on top of those caves. That building still exists, as we see in the rest of the pictures, in its entirety. It's probably the only 2,000-year-old building in the world that still exists in its entirety and is still used. Following that, we see a picture of the building as it appeared about 1,000 years ago during the Crusader conquest, when they built a fortress outside. Going one picture down, we see what the building looked like when we arrived back in Hebron in 1967. You'll notice on the right side the stairs going up the eastern wall of the building. Jews were allowed to go up only to the 7th step. They weren't allowed to go inside the building for 700 years. And the final picture is as we see the building today, when it is accessible to anybody and everybody from around the world. The next room that we go into is a pictorial history of the Jewish community in Hebron. We can, of course, begin with Cave of Machpela, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs. This is a photograph about 100 years old. Here we have photographs of the Avram Avinu synagogue, built in the middle of the 1500s by Jews who had been exiled from Spain in 1492. These photographs were taken in the early 1920s. Next to this, we have a very beautiful picture of Beit Romano, the Romano house. This building was built in the middle of the 1870s by a Jew from Turkey named Romano, hence the name Beit Romano. We've added onto this building 3 floors, and today it serves as Yeshivat Shavei Hebron. There are over 350 Torah students studying here in the building today. The next exhibit over is that of Chabad. Chabad came to Hebron in the early 1800s and lived here until the riots until 1929. The most important of the Chabad residents here was a woman, Menucha Rochel, who was the granddaughter of the Baal Tanya, the founder of the entire Lubavitch Chabad movement. She's buried here in the ancient Jewish cemetery in Hebron. The last exhibit in this room is that of the Hebron Yeshiva that came here from Slobodka in Lithuania in 1924 and 1925. Here are photographs of the study hall, the rabbis, and a class picture from 1928. The next room is a memorial room for the Jews that were killed here in 1929 in the Hebrew year Tarpat. As far as we know, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Jews and the Arabs lived here peacefully together. However, that changed following the arrival of the British in the 1920s. They appointed Haj Amin al-Husseini as the Mufti of Jerusalem. He incited against the Jews, and that led to a horrendous riot and massacre here in 1929. 67 Jews were murdered in Hebron, 70 were wounded, and 3 days after the massacre, the surviving Jews were expelled. Here we have photographs of all of the victims, the men and the women and the children. Behind those pictures are gravestones, the stones of the buried people here. The cemetery was destroyed when we came back in 1967. We found these stones in the field, scattered around. We brought them here as a memorial and rebuilt the cemetery. There are photographs here of Jews wounded, very, very horrible pictures that show some of the barbarity of what happened here, and also photographs from the homes and the synagogues, the Torah scrolls that were destroyed. This is what happened to the Jewish community, leaving it in ruins in the Tarpat 1929 riots. Here we have photographs of the return to Hebron and to Cave of Machpela, the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs, in 1967. This site had been off limits to Jews for 700 years. Now, after 7 centuries, Jews had returned. This is a photograph of Rabbi Shlomo Goren, then the chief rabbi of the IDF, hanging an Israeli flag on Cave of Machpela as he was entering the building. This was the sign of our return, the return of the Jewish people and the state of Israel to Hebron. The next room that we go into represents the return to Hebron, and the Jewish people came back to live in this holy city. In 1967, we returned to the city. In 1968, a group of families came here for the Passover holidays. Following Passover, they moved up to the Israeli military compound and lived there for 2.5 years until Kiryat Arba was founded. In 1979, a group of women and children came into Hebron, moved into Beit Hadassah, the Hadassah house, and lived in this building for an entire year. Very, very difficult circumstances and conditions. Only following a terrorist attack outside in the street A year after the women had moved in, when 6 men were killed and another 20 were wounded, did the Israeli government finally reissue the permits necessary for the renewal of the Jewish community in Hebron. Here we have photographs of the women and children that came back here. Their dedication and their determination brought us back to Hebron. Without that determination, being able to live here in such difficult circumstances for over a year, I don't know if we would have been in Hebron today.